what can you say about the experiences that you gained from each of these studios um, that you worked in prior to moving into London? Because as like the journey from each studio seems like every studio was different and you learned different things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a really good question, because like as soon as you asked it, I was like, yeah, I can. So from Animal Logic, the first studios, I'll just pencil it to like they gave me an in. They gave me a foot in. That's what I got out of it mostly. Animal Logic gave me confidence.
Right.
It gave me the confidence I needed to get started, because initially I was so in awe of, the people around me.
Yeah.
And not that they were bad or anything,
Yeah.
but after quite a short amount of time, I found myself, they trusted me a lot. And suddenly I kind of started feeling like they were coming to me for questions, no one knew how to use ZBrush because it was so new at the time. But at home, I was ZBrushing my little heart out, because I was just like, that's the future, so I knew where all the buttons were. I wouldn't say I was the best sculptor in the world, but I just knew how ZBrush worked. So I had a lot of old school guys coming to me, guys and girls, coming to me and going like, hey, what's, how do I do this in ZBrush? And then they would try for 5 minutes and just like hate the interface and be like, Simon, can you just do this? And so I'd find myself like, I felt, very, very empowered, because I felt like all my previous knowledge and all my tinkering at home was actually helpful in that environment.
Hi, and welcome to the VFX Artists Podcast. In today's episode, I'm very excited to bring on Simon Legrand, whom I think is a legendary VFX artist. During today's discussion, I'm looking to find out more about Simon's journey, which has evolved tremendously around so many different studios, including Weta, ILM, Double Negative, Dr. D, Animal Logic, and currently Untold Studios in London. So yeah, during today's discussion, looking to find out more about Simon's journey, which is incredible, and as well as to find out more about what he currently does as a real-time supervisor at Untold Studios, as well as to learn a bit more about what the industry has been like since his journey into the industry. I hope you enjoy the show. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Yeah, it's great. It's great to finally have you on the show.
Likewise.
Yeah. Well, I've been wanting to have you on for a while, and I looked at your resume, and I think it's extremely colorful and inspirational, and and I feel like you have so much story and experience behind you, and I'm looking forward to to find out a bit more about how it all came about. So yeah, just if that's okay with you, do you mind just introducing yourself and just tell us a bit more about your current role and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Simon Legrand, and currently I'm the real-time supervisor at Untold Studios in London. That's who I am. That's the short introduction.
Yeah. Well, so I'm wondering how did you find yourself in the VFX industry, and what or who inspired it?
Okay. I guess it probably like many of us, the initial inspiration came from Jurassic Park. In fact, it's funny that I didn't mean to have this on my desk just now, but this is actually the book.
Right.
So if you go through this making of Jurassic Park book, there is at the very, very end, there are like 2 pages with some computer screens on it.
Okay.
And I was going through thinking like, wow, how do they make these dinosaurs move so realistically with stop motion? I was aware of stop motion at the time. I was quite young, but I was kind of interested in animation. And I had seen RoboCop, and I remembered Ed 209 kind of moving like very robotically, even though it's a robot.
Yeah.
And so when I saw Jurassic Park, I was really sort of blown away by how smoothly they could move.
Yeah.
So I asked my dad in the car, and he said, "Oh, I heard that they were using computers for this." So then he got me this making of Jurassic Park, and I kept looking for the computers. I only found, 2 pages with screenshots of wireframes.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of like light bulb moment that made me think like, wow, computers could do this. This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But I never really considered it as a potential career path. It was more something that I just found extremely cool. But at the time, I was quite young. I think I was maybe 11 or 12. I just wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was my thing. And most of my teenage years, I focused most of my study on being a pilot, and I didn't really consider animation or anything like that as something too serious until well, I still played around with it. That's the thing. I say like I wasn't taking it seriously. It was 3D was sort of like the thing I did instead of playing video games. A lot of my friends were playing video games or going out, being all popular and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was staying at home. I had a computer, and a friend of mine showed me that you could get like 30-day trials of 3D software from 3D World magazine.
Okay.
So I would buy 3D World magazine and run the whole 30-day trial of every software, every 3D software that they had. So I was going through True Space, 3D Studio Max, and because I had to keep buying and starting the trial again, it was always a new piece of software. So I was kind of like trying all sorts of different programs. Even got to try Houdini like that back then, which was like Houdini 8, I think, or maybe even 7. But I was just doing that on the side for fun until it came to apply for the Air Defence Force Academy in Australia. I went for the first test, and they immediately told me I was colorblind, which I didn't know.
Right.
And that was an immediate kind of rejection. So
right. Wow.
It was a little bit of a, it was a tough thing. But in fact, if you've ever seen the movie Little Miss Sunshine, that hit close to home.
All right. Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, that was a bit disappointing. And then I thought, well, being colorblind, I can't be a fighter pilot. And I was thinking, like, actually, I don't think I want to be any other kind of pilot. It just didn't inspire me to. At the time, I was doing flying lessons, so I was working at a shop on weekends and saving enough money, and then as soon as I had enough money, I would like buy myself a flying lesson. So I could fly a plane. I had done a couple of solo flights at that point. But I kind of realized, speaking to everyone around me in the kind of pilot school, that being a commercial pilot was really not what I wanted to do. And so there was a moment there where I was just kind of like left a little bit in limbo, not really knowing what was next. And then I spoke to my dad. Well, actually, I was in the car, and my school, they would give us like this book where you have all the things that you can do at university as a degree, so that you can kind of browse and see what interests you. And I went to look at the aviation section, and top left on the other page was animation.
Right.
And when I saw animation, I was like, whoa, like you can do that at university? And boom, and I was like, this is it. I've been doing it in my bedroom for 5 years now. Like this must be it. So, I kind of looked at my dad and I was like, hey, how would you feel if I just dropped the whole aviation thing and went to animation? He was like, do what you want, man. So I was like, okay, that's the one. I'm just gonna try and study animation. And so that was the turning point.
Oh, interesting. Very Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, very interesting in terms of story from other people that I've heard. So it's really cool. Um, so yeah, so I went through your resume, or like your LinkedIn, and I realized you've gone from like character modeling to 3D generalist and creature 2D and real time supervising, and also you're a founder of the mocap studio. So yeah, I'm just very curious about how it all began, and if you're able to run us through that journey, from in terms of, as you said, you did a computer animation course. So I'm wondering at what stages or what interested you, um, between the character modeling and then switching to being a journalist, and then the creature TD and all of that stuff, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned my LinkedIn, I think I need to bring it up again
Mm.
just in case, because I might forget stuff. It's been a while. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
think my first job was like maybe in 2003. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's right. Which yeah is a while ago now.
Mm.
Yes. Well, after sort of seeing this degree, this animation degree in the magazine, I applied for it. But the the intake was actually quite difficult because it was on the Gold Coast in Australia.
Okay.
And on the Gold Coast in Australia at the time, there was really only one animation school that was sort of worth anything.
Okay.
And it was a 2D animation school. They didn't really have any 3D to speak of. But I was happy with that. You know, it was like animation's animation. You know, I always loved the Tex Avery stuff and the Hanna-Barbera stuff. So I was just like, that works for me, you know. So I started drawing a lot more, and I put a portfolio together of drawings, and that was sort of one of the ways to get into the school, was to put in a portfolio, and also some of your grades in high school,
Okay.
which for me luckily were pretty good because I had been busting my bum to become a fighter pilot, so I had decent grades. But yeah, they were very much on the portfolio, and the first year that I applied, I didn't get in, and suddenly it kind of made me, because I guess in a way I didn't take it, I didn't give it as much respect as I should have. I sort of thought, it's animation, it's fun, it's eclectic, it's and it especially 2D animation, I was just like, I'll just put in some drawings and I should be fine. And that didn't work out very well for me. So I found myself, being a bum on the Gold Coast for another year, because I had to wait for the next year of intake. So I essentially took that year off as a way to kind of find myself. Hung out with my breakdance crew and just pretty much did nothing. Well, actually, I did learn that I didn't want to do shitty jobs anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Because I did a lot of those.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
It kind of like, that was the year that cemented like, I need a profession. I can't just cruise through life. So it was a good year in terms of like learning what the real world has to offer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So the next year I put in a lot more work in my portfolio, and I got in, but I got into two schools. I got into that Queensland College of Arts animation degree, but I also got an offer from the University of Queensland for a degree that was much more technical, or that seemed more technical. They called it multimedia design, but based on the syllabus that they sent us, it sounded like there was potential for a lot more 3D, and that's what I wanted to do. So I jumped on that one. I picked that one, and first 6 months to a year, I did quite well, but nobody there knew 3D. Like it was just nothing at all. It was architecture software, CAD design, Flash, Macromedia Director, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah, I do.
And I realized pretty quickly that I had sort of made a mistake. Like, this was not the place where I was going to learn 3D. In fact, my first semester, I got such high grades in everything that in the second semester I started tutoring courses that I hadn't taken yet. So the lecturers were like, well, you haven't taken this course, but I'm going to give you a full grade on it and you can tutor it as well, which is a bit weird. And that's sort of like the moment where I was like, and I'm not saying because I was particularly smart or bright or anything. It was mainly because I had done all that stuff at home in the past. Like I had gone through all the 3D World 30-day trials you can think of. So I just kind of knew this stuff. And that's when the lecturers themselves were like, Simon, like, can you help me put the course together for the next semester? I was like, well, should I be really paying you to teach me this stuff? This seems a bit strange. So the year after, I switched over to the Queensland College of Arts with 2D animation, and started there. And definitely, it was kind of an interesting degree, very, very much arts driven, and zero technical ability in the building. Like no one really knew how to use a computer there. And the drawing part of it was cool, but I just kept boiling in me that like, I'm not wasting my time, because you're never wasting your time when you're learning the basics. But number one, I didn't want to be a character animator, even in 3D. And two, I kind of felt like if I want to really do what I want to do, which really was make the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. It wasn't make Bugs Bunny or whatever. Like if I want to find that career, I need to use computers. I need to do 3D. And I need to find somebody that can teach me something, and so I started just sending my resume to every single studio in sort of Brisbane, Gold Coast area, which wasn't many at the time. There was a studio called Cutting Edge. There was a studio called Photon. They were based at the Warner Brothers movie studios. And then there was a small animation studio called Liquid, and another one called Light Nights. And Light Nights and Liquid were doing mostly like 2D animation series, like TV animation for kids, basically. And so I just sent a bunch of resumes and got nothing, until one of my old tutors from uni, who was an architect, said, "Hey man, I got some work to do. I know you're good in 3D. Can you help me out?" So I just started working with him, and little bit by little bit, my interest for uni and the courses I was taking was like dwindling. And so by the end of that 6 months, I just told the Queensland College of Arts that I was like not going to continue. I told them I was taking a break, a sabbatical, but deep down I knew I was never going to come back. And so once I had like free time, like real free time, without seemingly irrelevant uni courses taking up all my time, I just started getting really aggressive with the job applications, to the point where I told all of them I'll come in and work for free. Like I need a foot in. Just let me prove to you that that I can do this. Most of the studios were like, "Nah, it doesn't really work like that. I don't even know if we're allowed to do this." But one of the studios was like, "Well, sure, come in. Let's see what you got. And we can't tell you that you're going to be officially working on our show, but if you want to sit down at a free computer and just take a look at what's being done and do your own thing on the side, go for it." And really quickly, I was just like helping out. I was starting to do models for the show and going through reviews. And so within like a week, they were like, "Okay, Simon, we got to pay you now. Like, you can't do this for free." So they just started, paying me. And that was basically how I got my first job. I just kept working with them for 6 months on this TV series for kids. And once I had that, then when I did the next kind of batch of applications, they all kind of came back to me with like offers. So I had gotten my foot in basically by just by not taking no for an answer, I guess.
Yeah.
But those were different times. Back then, if you had used a piece of 3D software, you potentially could get a job. They weren't really looking at talent, and the potential pool of hires was pretty small because no one really knew that this was a thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that was the kind of the road to the first job. After that, it kind of became like a real. After that, it was a real snowball. Mainly, I guess my main driver initially was I wanted to do characters. But I wanted to be a character TD. Like I wanted to be on the technical side of characters as much as possible. I mean, I liked modeling, and definitely because I wanted to be in characters at home for my personal projects, my demo reel and stuff, I would always model the characters first, so that was, so I did a lot of modeling the character first, and then getting to rigging, and then getting sick of that project, and then moving on to another project, and then going through the whole modeling process again, and then never quite finishing the rigging of that next one. So I ended up doing a lot of modeling and not as much rigging as I wanted to in my personal time. So studios kept on putting me on character modeling jobs until I got to Liquid, and I sort of did both. I would model a character, rig it, put some shaders on it, and pass it on, because it was a very small operation. It was basically just 2 of us who would model and rig the characters, and then pass them on to 5 or 6 animators who would just start animating a whole bunch of shots. We're doing we were working on a cartoon at the time called Duck Dodgers. It's a Cartoon Network Daffy Duck cartoon. It's like Daffy Duck in space. And they had like some 3D, like Futurama, some cell shaded 3D. And so we were doing all that stuff. And then it was great fun, actually. Really lovely stuff. And then after Liquid, I sort of realized like I needed to kind of go, I needed to make it to one of the massive studios. Like, I sort of thought, okay, the Gold Coast or Brisbane has offered me everything that it has so far. Like, I don't think I'm going to learn much more or progress much more if I stay here. So I started applying at Animal Logic, and Animal Logic and Rising Sun at the time, and Fuel VFX. At the time, they were kind of like the 3 big ones in Australia, where working there meant that people knew, that people worldwide would kind of know that studio. Anything else was, local. That's about it. And I applied at Animal Logic, I think 2 years in a row. And didn't get in at all. And then my second application, it just went unanswered. I was getting a little bit desperate, and so I thought I need a trip. I need to have a holiday. I was quite young, because I never finished my university before I got into the workforce. I was usually about a year or 2 younger than most people around me. And I was like, I never did my year of traveling that everyone does. I never went out there. So I thought, I was really into anime. So I was like, let's go to Japan. And I went to Japan by myself as a 20-something, 22-year-old. And it was an absolute disaster, that trip.
All right.
One day, if we ever have a beer together, I'll tell you all about it. But I'll keep it off the podcast. But it was a complete disaster of a trip.
That's a shame.
I came back and I was like, I'm never traveling again. And but when I got back, I was a little bit depressed because that trip went so badly. And one day I was still sleeping at like, probably early afternoon, and my phone rings, and it's like, hello, it's Patricia from Animal Logic. How are you? And I just kind of like rose like Dracula,
Hello.
and they're like, yeah, we've got your application, we'd like to offer you a job, when can you start? I was like, I can start tomorrow. And they're like, okay, I'm like, calm down there, buddy. How about next week? And I was like, okay. And they're like, what are your salary expectations? I was like, I don't know, what do you want to give me? And they're like, okay, we'll give you this. I was like, I'll take it. And I was just so happy to kind of have this next chapter of my career open up. At the time, I was just like, let's go, let's do this. I packed up everything. I didn't have much to pack because I was kind of back at my parents' house after the disastrous trip. So I just kind of packed a backpack and took off to Sydney. Sort of left everything behind, and then my first few days was just like, looking for a place to stay and stuff. And then the weight of the change kind of started dawning on me on my first day at Animal, where they were doing a like a induction, like where they kind of walk you through. And at the time, like Happy Feet was in full swing. So Animal Logic was just full of just world-class talent. There are like people from all over the place who'd worked at ILM, who'd worked at Weta, who'd worked at everywhere that was anything. And at the time, for a kid like me to like be sitting next to someone who worked on Star Wars, I was just like, what the hell? And the enormity of it kind of started weighing on me, whereas I just started really stressing and thinking like getting the imposter syndrome.
That's it.
I was like, I am not worthy. What am I doing here? They're gonna find me out soon. Like, then I was like, well, I should just try to do as much work as I can to put on my demo reel before they realize I shouldn't be here, and then I get fired. So I had nothing else there. I had no friends in Sydney. I had I was living in a share house with a 40-year-old German lady who was lovely, but we had nothing in common. So I just didn't want to be home, and I didn't have any people to hang out with. So I just spent most of my time at work, until like crazy late o'clock, because I just had nothing to do at home. And so I just kind of started plowing through work, probably in a slightly unfair way, because other people who were working on the same sequences as me had friends and had a life. And I would just be able to kind of get through quite a lot of work because I just didn't have one. But I thought I used it to my advantage. I wouldn't recommend that as a good strategy to kind of get ahead. It's definitely, it's not healthy, and it's not healthy for the industry either. This competition of who stays the latest at work is, it's been a big thing in the industry for a long time, and it really should not be that way. It made me think of the smaller studios that I worked at in Brisbane, and they used to lock the doors at 6:30 when the bosses left. Everyone left. No one would stay back to try to finish something. And that was just not the case in bigger studios. And so I just started working until crazy o'clock, and getting stuff done, which was nice. They hired me in the commercials department, so I was doing mostly like generalist work for commercials. Basically I was just gonna, you need something done, I will do it, whatever it is. I was a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. But I was always happy to kind of learn on the fly, and just get stuff done. At some point, there's a funny story there. I don't know if I should tell it. I'll say it anyway. But yeah, this story is funny anyway. So I was working late. No, I was working on a weekend, and for the first time, somebody had asked me to light and render something. So I just didn't know how to do it. They were using something called MayaMan at the time, which was like a plugin from Maya to RenderMan, but it was Animal Logic's own custom plugin of Maya to RenderMan. So there was really no way to kind of Google an answer, because it was internal stuff, and I didn't really know how to find the internal documentation anyway. So I just sent to the email list, you know, the VFX email list. I was like, hey, I'm supposed to light something, but I have absolutely no idea how to do this with Maya, man. I'd love to, you know, if anyone's in the building, you know, by any chance and wants to help me, that'd be great. And then I just sent the email, and then I went downstairs to the kitchen to fix myself some toast. And then I washed one of my plates and I put it in the sink, and then I dropped the sponge in the sink as well. And this tall guy with a long beard, kind of looked like a biker.
Can imagine.
Comes in and just looks at me and goes like, the sponge should not be in the sink. You got to put the sponge outside of the sink. And I'm like, oh, sorry. But because of the way he looked, you know, kind of looked, he looked like an older biker. But also didn't quite look like a computer technician. If you know what I mean. I kind of thought he was with facilities.
Right.
So I'm like, sorry, man. Anyway, I'm Simon, and I think I said something along the lines of like, are you in facilities? Or and he was like, no, not in facilities. I just work here. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So now I go back up to my desk and I have an answer from the guy who programmed Maya, man.
Okay.
Oh no, who programmed the thing. So I'm like, oh, cool. So I got the right answer. And he's like, and then he put another email. He said, I'll come up and help you anyway. And he comes up and it's him.
All right.
And I was like, oh shit.
Oh wow.
Like the OG programmer of Animal Logic.
Wow.
And I'm like, hey, are you with facilities? That was a funny story.
It was a cool encounter.
I kind of went home just going like, Simon, you idiot, you idiot. But so I was in commercials, and I just really wanted to break out of commercials, mainly because I just wanted to be in movies in a way, you know, also because I wanted to kind of be able to point at the screen and go, you see, mom, I'm doing something, you know, like look at my name. Which, you know, is probably not the best reason to want to do this, but it was partly also because I really wanted to work within a workflow that was a film workflow. Commercials workflows were at the time very ad hoc, and it was like, if you could do it, you mash it up together. There was always like an awesome flame guy at the end that would just pick up all the garbage that you've rendered out and make it work. So it was nice, but I was really hungry for that kind of big pipeline, like how to do things right the first time sort of thing. And Animal Logic just wasn't really keen on letting me go from the commercials department. So I applied at Fuel, who was also a TV commercials house, but they were doing a lot of film VFX as well. And Fuel hired me, and then I worked on The Spirit there, which was not the greatest film, but it was a film, so I was happy with that. And then soon after, I jumped to Dr. D Studios, which was the studio that George Miller opened to make Happy Feet 2 and also Mad Max Fury Road. That was super exciting. And that's where I sort of got my first taste of Houdini in production. They were using the hell out of Houdini over there. Like they probably had all the best Houdini guys from Rising Sun, because Rising Sun had a lot of Houdini in-house as well. So all the best guys from Rising Sun, you know, showed up and just started showing people what Houdini was all about. It blew my mind. And even though I was a modeler / kind of like a concept modeler at Dr. D, they called it VizDev, visual development. So we would like model some quick stuff and then model some icebergs and start framing stuff. It wasn't really pre-viz, it was more like 3D concept art. So I was not in a really technical position there, but seeing all the other people doing Houdini stuff, I was just, my mouth was watering. I was I think I need to get into this, you know. Never got a chance to really do a lot of Houdini there, but because I applied at Weta and I got an answer, and that was in the layout department. So I just went to Weta before I kind of got a chance to really dip my toes in Houdini at Dr. D. But yeah, that was a big next step as well. Like the the thing that kind of that I remember the most about like showing up at Weta was initially I applied in the modeling department at Weta because I thought, well, that's what I have the most experience in, at least the most demonstrable experience in. So I guess that's where I'm more likely to get. What I didn't take into account is that basically every best modeler in the world wanted to work at Weta in the modeling department. So I was up against all the top row of ZBrush Central, you know. And that didn't really have a chance. And so they didn't really get back to me on that. And a friend of mine who worked in the layout department over there told me, like, just apply in layout, they're desperate for people. And at the time I was like, wait, I've never even heard of that department. Because I worked in so many studios, I was just so, you know, the lighters were doing their own layout, you know. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. You know, if it means working at Weta, I'm in. So I applied, and that I got an answer on very, very quickly. So I went to interview there, and sort of saw Wellington and the Weta Cave, did my interview. Went back to Australia, and then I was just thinking like, oh, I hope I get it because this was really cool. I was only there for 2 days, but I just I could feel it. And, you know, I could smell King Kong and the Lord of the Rings. They were just around the corner. You know, I was just so excited to get in there. And they called me back. They said, yeah, come in. And it was sort of the same thing as with Animal Logic. I was just like, okay, I just dropped everything and left, you know. Although I had a long-term girlfriend at the time who's now my wife. It's quite a long relationship there. She was with me, and she was not really that psyched about going to New Zealand because her career was just starting, and Sydney was a good place for her to do what she does. But I kind of was like, I can't turn this away. This is what I like. So she was understanding enough to kind of support me through it. And she came along, which I'm very thankful for. But yeah, that was a very, very difficult 2 years, I would say, you know. And I think it's important to bring up the relationship side of things because like this industry is an industry that it takes no prisoners, you know. Well, I'd like to think, I hope that it is getting better. And through my own lens, I think that it's getting better. I'm just not quite sure because I've also been lucky enough to, well, I'm now working at a slightly higher, with higher titles. So I hope that I'm not just blind to to what juniors are going through. I know that I, you know, take particular care with my team to make sure that they're not doing insane hours. But you know, I can't tell for the wider industry. I'm not too sure. But at the time, you know, Weta had, and I think they still do have that system, but they have safety in place now. But at the time, you were a freelancer working at Weta. They did not have any full-time people. And that was so that they could get around the hours, the hourly laws, you know, of how long you can work per day. And so the nice thing about that is that you would get paid overtime for every hour of overtime that you would do. You would get paid for it quite well because it was like time and a half. But the downside was that because you were getting paid well, and because everyone was so stoked to be at Weta, and because the work was so difficult, and the expectation, you know, like you can't just do something half-assed when you're there. You know, you can't just like go, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm out. You know, like hey, you're surrounded by giants of the industry, and you just, you know, and I mean, even the giants, like I'm talking, you know, Joe Letteri, and I was working on the supervisor called Steven Rosenbaum, who is nicknamed SLR. He's one of the original animators of the Velociraptors in the Velociraptor scene in Jurassic Park. And that was my supervisor there. And well, for a sequence that I was working on, he was my supervisor there. And, you know, I was totally fanboying on him, like,
Yeah.
but I was not showing it. So
Yeah, of course, yeah.
but the thing is he would be at work until 2 a.m. So
Yeah.
little 27
Yeah.
or 26-year-old Simon was not going to go home
course,
before Stephen
Yeah.
went, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would get an email as well, like, you know, saying, you know, Joe Letterry's gone home now.
Right.
Email would come anytime between midnight to 2 a.m. And that basically was code for like, I guess you guys can go home too. But that was towards the end of Avatar, and it was just a big, crazy, mad rush. And just everyone was, So I kind of arrived at Weta for like the last year or the last 8 months of Avatar.
Okay.
So it was rush from the day I arrived right up until the end. And during that time, I was working in layout, and then about halfway through, most of the layout work had been done, and everything was. You'd think so, right? 4 months before delivery, you'd think all the layout was done. And so so they kind of like they tried to shift a lot of the workforce to lighting. But because I was interested in Houdini, and I had a friend who knew Houdini from Dr. D, who came in and actually we organized like a Houdini lesson for all the Weta people that were interested in Houdini. Through that, the head of effects kind of noticed my name and was like, "Oh, would Simon want to, you know, come into effects to help us, you know, with the effects stuff?" I was like, "Sure, you know, why not? Sounds fun." I warned him, like, I've never done a particle sim in my life, but if I'm up for it. So I went there, and it was just so hard. Hard.
Of course.
My
quality.
time at Weta was just so stressful. And so it took a toll on my relationship massively. When you work so long and under so much pressure, you kind of become a bit of a person as well.
Of course,
sorry about the swearing, but
no, that's
you can bleep me out. But it can really take a toll on you. And you know, I used to kind of, when I was younger and, you know, bright-eyed and so excited about this, and I thought every polygon that I saw was cool. I would see the older guys were just like really kind of dead inside. And I used to just really hate them because I was like, man, look at you, you know, you're working in VFX, this is so much fun, and why are you always like looking down on people and being also negative? And after that kind of long slug, I was just, I got it, you know. It became the same, you know. They had some junior assistant TDs, ATDs they called them at Weta. So they were basically, you know, young people that were picked out of random schools and just given like an assistant TD job, which was basically junior work. And they were complaining all the time, like, this is, you know, I'm not getting paid enough to do so many hours. And I was just looking at them like, guys, like, you're in Weta, you know how many years I kind of waited before I could get it there, get in here, like, you know, I mean, sure, you know, you're getting, you know, entry level wages, but come on, you know, they you know, it just annoyed me. But yeah, because I was still, you know, I was still kind of excited about all this stuff, I guess. But then after a few years, I worked on Tintin while I was there as well, which was fun. Xmen First Class. And then The Hobbit was on the horizon, and Guillermo del Toro had just dropped out of directing The Hobbit, so it was going back to Peter Jackson. And because like I knew a lot of the people who worked on Lord of the Rings, because they're just everywhere, and after working on Avatar, a lot of these people were like, Lord of the Rings was so much worse. Like Avatar was a breeze.
All right.
And I was like, what? What? And I just didn't think I had it in me anymore. Like at that point, I kind of took a step back and I was like, I should feel very thankful, but you know, my wife and I are not
Yeah, of
you
course.
know, doing too well now because I'm just never home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Basically, it was that's
Mm.
didn't have to look further than that. I was just never home. We barely knew each other in
Yeah.
a sense, because I would go home at 2 a.m. and then get
Yeah.
up again at
Of course.
9, and you know,
Yeah.
and then I was like, okay, Avatar was cool, and I'm happy I did this. Do I want to be working even harder on The Hobbit?
Mhm.
And I was never a big fan of Lord of the Rings anyway. It's just
Yeah.
not my thing, you know.
Yeah.
I just don't
Mhm.
like this whole fantasy thing. I don't hate it. I'm just not that into it.
Yeah, sure.
I was like, no. So I kind of asked my my girlfriend. I was like, where do you want to go next? You know,
Mm.
I think we should go somewhere where we both can have a career. I think that's important. And so London was the obvious choice, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Cool. Oh, yeah, I was gonna I was gonna ask you, yeah, what made you move to London? But I guess you explained why.
Yeah, I mean, there were a
Yeah,
few other reasons to coming to London. The other
yeah.
thing was like Wellington is nice, but
Mm.
it's a complete microcosm.
Mm.
Through my lens at the time,
Yeah.
it was like Wellington was the Weta campus.
Okay.
That's how it felt, especially Miramar, which is the peninsula that most of the Weta buildings are on.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, all the Weta buildings are spread out throughout Miramar,
Mhm.
and it really does feel like you're on Weta University campus,
Oh, yeah.
and everyone around you is from Weta. You go to a restaurant or you sit at a bar, and it's just
Mm.
Weta people everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just felt very small and very much like a microcosm.
Mm.
And I was starting to be a little bit hungry for a
Yeah.
bit more diversity in kind of
Yeah.
my friend
Yeah, of course.
base,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, what do you think? What can you say about the experiences that you gained from each of these studios, um, that you worked in prior to moving into London? Because as like the journey from each studio seems like every studio was different, and you learned different things. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's a really good question, because like as soon as you asked it, I was like, yeah, I can. So from Animal Logic, the first studios, I'll just pencil it to like they gave me an in. You know, they gave me a foot in. That's what I got out of it mostly. Animal Logic gave me confidence.
Right.
It gave me the confidence I needed to get started, because initially I was so in awe of, you know, the people around me.
Yeah.
And not that they were bad or anything,
Yeah.
but after quite a short amount of time, I found myself, they trusted me a lot, and suddenly I kind of started feeling like they were coming to me for questions. You know, no one knew how to use ZBrush because it was so new at the time. But at home, I was ZBrushing my little heart out, because I was just like, that's the future, you know. So I knew where all the buttons were. I wouldn't say I was the best sculptor in the world, but I just knew how ZBrush worked. So I had a lot of old school guys coming to me, guys and girls, coming to me and going like, hey, what's you know, how do I do this in ZBrush? And then they would try for 5 minutes and just like hate the interface and be like, Simon, can you just do this? And so I'd find myself like, I felt, very, very empowered, because I felt like all my previous knowledge and all my tinkering at home was actually helpful in that environment. And they started trusting me with like entire commercials. Like there's some commercials on my reel at the time where all the 3D like was me, like all the modeling, the texturing, probably not the animation, because that wasn't really my bag. Although I did some crowd simulations, you know, randomly. I was just such a jack of all trade, you know. But like some commercials, I can almost point at all the 3D and just be like, that's all mine. And that was really, really empowering. So I got like some serious kind of probably a little bit misplaced self-confidence there.
Right. Yeah.
To the point where like after when I went to Fuel and then Dr. D, I was very much, I was not the greatest guy. I think I had too much of an ego. I just if I met myself now, if I met myself then now, I would probably not like myself very much. because yeah, at that time at Logic really kind of boosted my ego a little bit too far out. And then when I left Dr. D and started at Weta, that was like a humbling experience. Like all of a sudden I was like, oh, I was yeah, that was like, yeah, very, very humbling. And what Weta taught me, definitely being more humble. Like that's what I got out of Weta is, you know, it's just like anything. There's always someone better than you. There's always and there are people who are so much better than you that you can't even understand how their own brains work.
Exactly.
They're so much smarter that they're like aliens to you. You know?
Exactly.
Some of the technical people there were just like, whoa. And so yeah, being humble. But what Weta also taught me is that I didn't want to kill myself for the work. Because it was some of the best work around. And if I was going to kill myself on anything, it would have, you know, Avatar is a pretty good one. But I did kind of realize that like it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. So when I got to London, I kind of went in with that same frame of mind of, I've done the whole thing of like killing myself until midnight, and I'm not planning on doing this again, whether it's for the money or the coolness of the project. You know, I'm just not going to do this. But I was wrong, because I had to do it for many years.
Sometimes
because London is quite notorious for doing that. I didn't have to make the decision about the money part of it, because London doesn't pay you over time. But yeah, coming to London, I still worked a little bit longer than I would have liked to.
Are you able to tell us a bit about your current role at Untold Studios? And
so it's pretty cool. It's kind of like a dream job. So the thing that I've been learning on the side, you know, I always try to have something on the side that I'm learning. For the last few years before, pretty much from the time I started the mocap studio onwards, I was learning Unreal Engine on the side, mainly because for mocap studio it was a good thing to have, like real-time feedback of mocap characters and stuff like that, but also just because I wanted to get into real time. Had quite a pretty big passion for VR when it first came out. I was really into it, really wanted to get some VR stuff done, so I started learning both Unity and Unreal. For a while I was kind of using Unity a lot more because it was easier to get from point A to point B quickly. But as soon as I kind of dropped the whole VR thing and sort of moved on to like thinking about using game engines to do short films more, then, you know, Unreal became like the obvious choice. So I've been learning Unreal on the side for quite a few years, and never really thought that like I would get the opportunity to use it at work. But last year at Untold, I was taking care of mostly the CFX and creature simulation stuff. So like the muscle stuff, as well as like hair sims and cloth sims and things like that. And that was sort of mainly my bag. But because I had done that for quite a while at ILM, I think I had an approach to the creature simulation stuff that was quite efficient, which meant that it didn't actually take that much time for me to get the shots done. You know, I did some late nights here and there, mostly waiting for animation publishers so I could kick off my my sims. But the actual day-to-day work wasn't as heavy. So I was getting involved with pitches more and more with some of the producers at Untold. Were like, hey, we heard that you like Unreal, or you've used Unreal. These clients are asking us about Unreal. Do you have any ideas? and I would just be like so excited, be like, yeah, I got ideas. Well, hang on a sec. And I would literally, instead of, typing up an email or something, I would just open up Unreal and just start like messing around with stuff and putting a light here and there and just doing a little bit of a demo of a mocap character walking around and just sending that back to them. And I was like, you could do something like this or like that. And I think it kind of like caught the attention of the right people, where they were like, wait, isn't this guy supposed to be working on this? And they're like, yeah, no, he's actually doing the work, but he's also doing this. And I think they thought, all right, maybe his heart is in real time. And because it's such a new domain, I think it was probably a good thing that I was an old school VFX guy, in that I had like a proven track record of being reliable in delivering what I say I would deliver. And I think with this real-time stuff, it's a real danger at the moment, because there's a lot of mavericks who have a big mouth, and then when you actually start working with them, you realize that they just have no idea how 3D works at all. Like they've imported a bunch of mega scans into Unreal, and that's pretty much what they've learned how to do. And they move the sunlight, and then they're like, oh man, look at me, and they make a showreel out of that. But then when you actually come down to working with them, you realize they know nothing. So I think from that side of things, they were like, well, if we're going to have a real-time supervisor, might as well have someone whom we know knows 3D. And so that was cool. So they offered me the job end of last year, and then it was supposed to kick off in January, which it did. And it's a lovely place to be, because it's a completely new department, and kind of a new discipline as well. We've already got two really fun jobs in the pipeline. One is like a animation short film. The other one is more of a real-time kind of mocap performance type of deal. So both with their own completely different challenges. And the department is completely in its infancy. So we're building infrastructure. We're completely on the cloud at Untold. So we're running Unreal Engine on the cloud as well. So there's a whole bunch of optimization that needs to come with that. Setting up a proper Perforce workflow and all that, like source control, because you can't treat real time like you treat an old school VFX pipeline. The data management isn't the same. You can't reference files off disk. It has to go through this conversion process to turn into a UI set to live inside the project directory of the engine. So because of that, there's the workflow is different, and you need to treat it differently, which is kind of a tough nut to crack, because ideally you want someone that works in the VFX side of things to be able to just jump onto an Unreal job and feel at home and work like they usually work. But on the other side, you have to remember that, like, a very good example is that in Nuke or Houdini, if you want to try 3 different textures, you just import all 3 and then you just plug them and just like switch between the 3, and you go like, which one's best, If you do that with Unreal, you're going to go through, a whole import process, which is much slower than referencing from disk. Then you're creating IO, which, you have to be careful in big pipelines when a lot of people are working. IO is a dangerous thing to bottleneck. And so you're creating a lot more IO. And then on top of that, you're just putting so much useless data in the project cache. So like, while you're working, every time you import a texture, Unreal compresses that information, puts it in a cache somewhere to remember it. And it doesn't really link back to the JPEG or the EXR that you had on disk. So that cache, when you delete that texture, that cache stays, because Unreal doesn't know that you've deleted that texture. It doesn't care. It just keeps the cache. So you have this massive cache that starts building and building and building. And then suddenly everyone's cloud machines are like running out of space. Because of all that crazy useless information that's being built in. So to change the workflow, you can't really just tell the artist like, this is how it works, because most artists, they just want to do their work. And if they want to check 3 textures, they want to find a way to check 3 textures easily. So you have to start building tools that behave like what they are used to, but behind the scenes kind of does something else. So that's the challenges that we're going through now. We're hiring, so that's probably worth noting. We are hiring. This is not why I came on the podcast, but we're hiring. We're hiring, in especially technically apt Unreal artists. We are absolutely looking for technical animators, technical artists. Which are these are the words, the sort of the job titles in the games industry. They call them technical artists and technical animators. In VFX terms, I would call them, rigging and motion capture specialists and shader artists.
All right.
We've hired our first pipeline, department specific pipeline TD. So I'm really excited about that, because we're going to start being able to build a framework above all the kind of complex cloud infrastructure that we've built so far. We have new exciting projects knocking on the door every day. So there's going to be a lot of work in that space, and specifically a lot of work at Untold in the coming year.
So what do you see happening with Unreal and real time over the coming years, and what the best use case for it will be for the VFX industry, as well as for general consumerism, such as the future of film and cinema, and like for VR and AR?
That's an interesting one. It's a hard one to answer. Excuse me. I think probably the lowest, currently the obvious application of Unreal is on XR stages, LED screens, what some people call virtual production. Now it seems like Unreal themselves have coined a new term called ICVFX, in-camera VFX.
All right, okay.
Which I prefer that term because it separates it from the virtual production. Virtual production kind of covers too many things, and it makes it a bit complicated to explain the difference. And so LED screen, ICVFX, I'm on board with that terminology. That's the lowest hanging fruit. They're already kind of the main platform for that. There's not a lot of alternatives to do that sort of thing. So I think that's definitely that's a really good way into hardcore VFX for Unreal, because you have to use a game engine or a real-time renderer to be able to change the parallax for the camera in real time. So it's an easy kind of there's just no other way around it. So they really got in through that, and it's really good. But then the problem or the next challenge that they're going to face, I guess, moving into trying to shift that across to like final VFX, is I think because it's an engine that's designed to build in real time, it really doesn't like to think and behave in the way that VFX artists have been trained for decades to work. And the way that we've been working was with always the maximum resolution for everything. So if your computer can handle an 8K texture, you're going to put an 8K texture in it. And because everything is deferred and everything can be sent to the farm in a reliable way, I know that farms crash, but when a frame crashes, it doesn't corrupt your entire project. The philosophy and the approach to work is very much about the optimization gets done at render time, but all of the source files are massive, because luckily enough, the renderers that we use are smart enough to sample only the bits and pieces of a texture that it needs. And because the entire texture doesn't necessarily need to be loaded in memory all the time, or all the textures in that scene don't need to be loaded in memory all the time, all the renderers are quite smart about managing their memory and creating very detailed stuff like that. Unreal doesn't really think like that, and so optimization needs to be done from the ground up, and there's a lot of strategy that needs to be put into place. Even with the new Lumen and I forget the name of the polygon thing now, but right click, convert to, I forget. But the new, massive polygon importer thing that they've got, it's interesting, and yeah, it is a lot of detail, and it kind of like starts tying into what I was saying about like being able to import massive models and stuff, and it's great, but you just don't have the kind of control over this geometry that you would in Houdini, for example. Like in Houdini, if you want to create an entire city down to like every pipe, every window, everything, and every building is at the same resolution, there's no LOD, no nothing, and theoretically you were making a movie called Inception and you wanted that whole city to like be curled over into a tidal wave, you could do that, and the approach to doing it is insanely technical. Like you don't have to start hiring an entire slew of programmers to rewrite the entire engine so that it can do what you're asking it to do. You can't do that in Unreal. It's that simple. You could do it in a different way with a much different approach, and it would be very, very, you would have to like be very careful about what you do and how you do it. In Houdini, you just put a big old deformer on it and you just deform the crap out of it and it works, So that's the sort of thing where I think wherever Unreal kind of gives you fast and quick feedback and freedom, there's also a cost as far as it can't move 1 million points in space at a time. It can't deform 1 million points in space at a time. Not saying that in 5-10 years it won't be able to through the magic of some custom design chip from NVIDIA or something like that, but until then it's still very much a renderer, and it's a renderer that you need to treat very, very nicely. You have to be very careful with what you feed it if you want to get a good result out of it. When you look at something like Arnold or Mantra or RenderMan, I mean, those renderers they're not programmed to be fast. They're programmed to simulate exactly how light scatters through somebody's skin, or close enough to exactly. Some of the new renderers popping up. I think there's a paper for SIGGRAPH that was released recently of Manuka, which is Weta's custom renderer, and Animal Logic's custom renderer. I don't know what that's called. They're writing a paper about doing spectral lighting simulation. So instead of simulating RGB like most renderers do today, you're actually simulating the entire rainbow,
right.
And that way you get much more realistic light scattering. There's an old program called View, which used to do like really nice clouds and mountains and stuff. I think that was one of the first programs to ever kind of have a spectral renderer.
Right.
But the result showed that that it could do in 2004. It could do like renders of clouds and mountains that looked incredibly realistic, and nothing else could do that. So yeah, like the offline renderers are pushing realism to such an extent. You can't realistically, expect that sort of thing to be able to run in real time. So I see Unreal Engine not necessarily catching up, or probably ever, in that space. But I do see them catching up in things where realism doesn't matter as much. So animated series, I'm thinking like Clone Wars, the Clone Wars. Kids animation as well, like all the stuff that's on TV that looks like it was just kind of lit with one GI light and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
All that stuff, that is Unreal is going to just march into that market and just take over, because suddenly, you know, you're just not waiting for renders anymore at all. And the cost to frame ratio that you can kind of get is insane. You know, like my department at the moment, like we just don't use the render farm at all. So as compared to the other departments, even the animators use the farm more than we do.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a huge cost saving, because every node on that farm is costing money. It's a serious overhead. So I think, you know, especially with series form, because you have a lot of rendering to do, and it just needs to be done again and again in the same way. It's like a rinse and repeat kind of thing. I see Unreal as being like, I think if you were starting a children's animation studio now and you weren't considering doing it all in Unreal, I think, yeah, you'd be remiss, because for quantity, if you need to just output like some serious quantity, it's going to save you a lot of money on rendering and licenses and everything. So and Lumen is looking pretty gorgeous. It can really hold up to that sort of quality, I think. I guess, you know, if your entire TV show is like shiny little silver figurines, maybe you're going to need a few more ray trace bounces. So maybe Unreal's not your friend there. But other than that, that would be a market that it can move in and take over, I think. And then there's this whole new market that it's creating, and I think it, again, like we'd be silly to kind of ignore it, but that's the real-time influencers, or the real-time you know, streamers and stuff like that. Like those are very important pieces of IP that are being birthed right now for the first time. It's a completely new way of using animation and CG to interact with an audience, and create a following and create a brand. And it's still very, very new, but I think that has huge potential in the future, probably more so than a lot of people right now realize. And I think there's no other way to do it well at the moment except for Unreal. Probably Unity with a, you know, close second, but Unreal is definitely the best tool for the job right now.
Yeah, sure. Amazing. Very interesting. Let's see.
Oh yeah, and concept art.
I
think Unreal should be used a lot in concept art. If we could teach, you know, concept artists to use it a bit more, that would be handy, because Megascans, you know, it'll let you just do your whole thing, and then you paint over it, and it's beautiful, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. My next question is, what have you learned with leading artists and taking on great responsibility on the many shows that you've been involved in?
Initially, when I was a bit younger, I learned that I didn't want to do it. My first time officially leading was at Double Negative, when I was working on Jupiter Ascending. And I wasn't much of an effects specialist. I mean, I had been in the effects department at Weta for a while, but it still wasn't my thing. Like it wasn't, I wanted to be a Houdini generalist, and I also wanted my career to go towards creatures. But sort of, I don't know, DNEG decided that, like, for some reason I'd make a good effects lead. And that was my first time supervising a team of people who were much better than me. and I was clearly aware of it, and I just didn't want to be in that position. So, I mean, I got given a job and I did it, you know, but I tried to, as a lead on that job, what I tried to do is take on as much of the boring stuff, or the annoying stuff, or the stuff that was broken, and kind of leave the good, sort of juicy simulation stuff to my team, so that they just had a good time on the job, or as much as possible. So basically I just took on all the bad stuff. And as well as I noticed that, especially in my team on that job, they weren't very communicative people. They were really good at what they did, but they were more of a keep your head down, work hard kind of people. But in dailies, they just didn't have the tools to work through what a VFX supervisor had to say. And because I had much more experience than them in that department, I can talk, obviously. I was there. I was usually there for them in dailies. So every time any of them had to be in dailies, I was there with them. Didn't speak for them because that's not my place. So, but I could kind of gauge when they were being asked a question or told to do something, and they just didn't reply for a bit, or they, you know, either their voice was shaky or they just didn't know what to say. That's when I would jump in and kind of go, yeah, we're doing it like this because we plan on doing that. And, you know, shut up, man.
Yeah.
We'll get it done. Calm down. So I was, you know, I wasn't that bad, but it was more like I was kind of like a confident voice in dailies for them, which I think helped a lot, because otherwise you can start, you know, VFX supervisors, you know, just like any other job, there are great ones and there are absolutely terrible ones. And the terrible ones will make you waste so much of your time and so much of your precious life on absolutely pointless stuff that they will just call out because that's their job, I guess, to just say, fix this, even though it doesn't need fixing. A lot of them have very little kind of long-term vision of how the shot is going to come together as well. So if they see like something that looks a bit previsy, and they're not really sure what they're looking at, they're kind of like, what am I looking at here? You know, so there are some terrible ones out there. And when you're faced with those really bad VFX soups out there, you definitely need somebody in dailies like what I was doing at that time, defending them, and just kind of like reframing things and saying like, look, I know he said to resim this whole thing, but do not resim this whole thing. Like that is, that your sim looks awesome. We'll find another way. So yeah, stuff like that. But yeah, it was very difficult and very soul crushing. And also just not great for the ego, because, you know, they were just clearly better Houdini TDs than I was, and I shouldn't, you know, I didn't feel like I should be leading them. So I just kind of left DNEG sort of not wanting to really lead, and I kind of had made my decision to just become a really, really old senior. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to be one of those guys who just, they're like 50 and they're seniors and they're well paid and they can do everything they do in their sleep. They go home at 6, you know, like I was like, maybe I should just do that. As soon as I got into ILM in creatures, almost as soon as, they asked me to do half creatures, half effects, because the head of effects at ILM at the time was somebody who, with whom I had worked before at DNEG, and I think he liked working with me, and for some reason he just kind of wanted me to be part of the effects department and not just focus on creature sim. So I was okay with that, and he's, you know, lovely guy and a genius as well. And so he kind of convinced me bit by bit to like take on a lead role on effects again. So I did. I was a lead on Star Wars 7, and again, same thing. I just then found myself leading these two absolutely awesome TDs who just, I mean, one of them was this guy called Miguel Perez Senent. If that doesn't ring a bell, he's the guy who did the breach monster coming out of the water, smashing a ship, like a container ship. It's been doing the rounds on LinkedIn recently. It looks like it came straight out of, you know, Pacific Rim. And he did that at home on his computer with no render farm. Like he's a genius. I bet he was helping people on Odd Force
Right.
when he was 15. Like the guy's like a Mozart of
Yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
VFX. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find myself being this guy's lead. And the other one was a guy called Attila Torok, who's also just one of the absolute best Houdini TDs, you know, in the world, I think. He now works for Side Effects, and he's responsible for a lot of or probably all of the new pyro tools.
Okay.
So if you've seen the last Side Effects, you know, Houdini demo with all the giant like fire sims and all that, like he did that. So you know, here I am, you know, not really liking effects. Like I'm not a big effects guy. I always wanted to not do effects and just focus on characters. And I'm finding myself, you know, leading these two, you know, geniuses. I did it probably in the same way that, you know, I did it at DNEG, which was take on the stuff that wasn't much fun so that they can focus on the really good stuff, and then, you know, be a voice for them in dailies if they need it, and then after that I was like, okay, that's it, I'm done. I'm just no more of this. But then yeah, things change. I, you know, quit VFX. Well, you know, what I thought was like the end. So I quit ILM and I thought, all right, I'm done with VFX. I'm just going to try to do my own thing. Started the mocap studio, and just worked in an environment that was so different for a few years of, you know, kind of like being a nomad freelancer, but in mocap. It was a bit of a struggle. But it was really interesting and really different. But it did kind of it made me miss the teamwork that we had in VFX, you know, and also I think I learned things during that time about what leadership means. And what I didn't understand back at DNEG and ILM was that my leadership doesn't necessarily mean being the best at Houdini or being the best at Unreal or whatever software it is. Sometimes, well, more often than not, good leadership is simply just being able to not only manage your team. And when I say manage, it's not just like, you know, put this person on this job and this job and, oh, they're not busy, so let's just put them on this. Is actually knowing your team enough to know the tasks that they would get excited about doing and do well because of that reason. So it's not really like a terrible manager will just look at a spreadsheet and think the numbers add up here. I think management is much more about knowing your team incredibly well. And, you know, it's probably bad form these days to say, like, you know, go to the pub and have a beer with them, because you also have to respect the fact that not everyone drinks beer or wants to go to the pub or, you know, so, but if you can find time to have more personal ways of connecting with your team, I think as a manager, you'll just be able to, in a way, predict what makes them happy. And through that, you will get a better bang for your buck. They will work harder and do a better job. And there are also some people that are just not aware of how skilled they are at certain things. And so if you just listen to what they say they want to do, like, I want to do this or I want to do that, you may also be missing the fact that they're extremely talented at doing this third thing. And you have to find a way to make them understand that and maybe give that third thing a shot because they're really good at it. You can't do that if you don't know your team very well. And so my time at the mocap studio gave me time to reflect on that. And then I started at Untold. And because it was a pretty small studio at the time and a really new studio, and I was quite senior by that stage, you know, I'm getting old. When I came into Untold, the dynamics were very different to the dynamics of me coming into a place like DNEG or Weta or ILM, because, you know, at Weta, ILM, and DNEG, there were 40 other people just like me, you know. And so I didn't feel special in any way. And they just didn't have time to treat me as someone who's special because we were just one of thousands of people. At Untold, the studio was very new, but it was also crewed by very, very senior or very experienced people.
Yeah.
And so the fact that there was a smaller crew of people who had been through, through the ringer, like I had, we all spoke the same language immediately, and we all kind of we all had an understanding pretty quickly, and the big thing was suddenly I felt actually listened to. So instead of being in a meeting and saying like, can we please just start using Alembic as a caching format, which is what I did when I first got to London, like big battles about like, let's just use Alembic because your custom formats are not working. Now it's when I'm in those meetings, if I bring up an idea like that, it's going to be considered, and and generally I won't say it if it's not right.
Yeah, of course,
because I'll keep my mouth shut if I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so that was the nice thing, is I had much more influence over how things were done, which was good. And then it built that ego back again. And I when they offered me a supervisory job, I was like, I think I've kind of sat down and thought about it and kind of mulled over my previous experiences for long enough that now I feel like I can try and do it the right way. And the biggest thing that I don't want to do is treat crew like a commodity. And so that will be, as we grow as a department, that would be my absolute priority, is that everyone who works in the department is looked at and seen entirely, and not just through the lens of their submissions on Shotgun, not just through the lens of how they communicate via email or on Zoom, but actually trying to absolutely understand where every single new hire comes, like I want to say comes from, but like comes from in their mind,
exactly,
like where their heart is,
exactly,
the true them. And and look, if somebody's not really comfortable talking to me about something personal, that's not what I'm asking for.
Exactly,
but I will hound them and ask them about what they want to do, what makes them happy and what doesn't, because I think that's the kind of manager that I want to be.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You're essentially, you want the best for them. You want to get them. Literally.
Yeah. I mean, it might sound a bit grandiose to say it like it's like a family, but it is. You spend, well, not with work from home, but back in the day, we'd have to spend more time in the office with our team than we do with our partners and children, so or more awake time,
Exactly.
when you're sleeping, it doesn't count.
Of course,
so it needs to be treated with emotional intelligence, and I think that's what a lot of I would say, a lot of leads, supervisors, a lot of people in power generally have very little emotional intelligence, especially when it comes to work.
Funny question, but considering how far back your journey has started, and you're still going, so I'm just wondering, if do VFX artists retire?
Well, I'm 38 now, or 37, going on 38. Well, we've been talking about that with my wife a little bit here and there. I'm also very fortunate that the decision to come to London to help her career also became like quite a fruitful event. So she's a very professional woman, and who works really hard, and together as a team we've been able to put ourselves in a quite a stable financial situation, which is not something that's given to everyone, unfortunately. All of it, a lot of it was luck, as well as hard work, but
of course.
luck as well. And the thing there is like, yeah, do we want to retire? You know, my instinct is, the best example is I tried to take some holidays at the beginning of this year or end of last year. I had worked throughout the entire year and I didn't take a single holiday. And then I also racked up a whole bunch of time in lieu because I was doing some weekends and stuff like that to finish a few jobs. And I came to like November and realized, oh, like I've got like 2 months or 2 months and a half of holiday that I need to take, and I might lose some of it next year if I don't take them now. So I was like, I think I'm just going to take December and January off. Luckily, Untold were like, yeah, go for it. You worked out enough. Like you deserve it. Just take your time off. Very understanding. So I just disappeared for 2 months, and that, you know,
you didn't enjoy that.
Came to about, because the thing is, my wife wasn't able to take the same amount of time. So, you know, for the first few weeks it was fun, but then she goes back to work and it's lockdown as well. So I'm like in here.
What do I do?
I should have been learning guitar or more, but I didn't because I've got more guitar and I've got too many guitars and not enough skill. But I was just I just sat right here at my computer and then started kind of looking at some of the characters that Untold had made in the past, and then just like, well, I might just try to like optimize it for Unreal. And then next thing you know, it's like it's working, and then I'm putting a mocap suit on, and then I'm making the blend shapes. And then I realized like the whole of January that was supposed to be a holiday, I just ended up doing this character. So I feel like if I retire, I'm going to definitely need to find a way to be busy somehow. Whether it's a short film or I don't know what it is. I don't think it will be a short film. I've tried and wanted to make short films so many times, and I don't like my own ideas, which is a really annoying thing. Every time I come up with an idea, I just don't like it. So maybe I should just, you know, team up with somebody who has an idea that they're passionate about, and I just can help them make it a reality or something. But retirement. That's a weird one. I don't know.
Right? What's your next big challenge or interest? I mean, I know you mentioned your Unreal is that next big thing at Untold, but would you say that's the next big challenge, or do you personally have any next big challenges or any interests?
That's a good question. I think my next really big challenge isn't really going to be Unreal itself, but I think it's going to be growing this department, because, you know, the reality of it is I've never managed an entire full-blown active department before, and luckily it's growing at a pace that is as slow as the amount of people that we can find, because it's so hard to find skilled Unreal TDs. But as it grows bigger and bigger, I think my biggest challenge and probably the biggest source of stress for me will be making sure that the gears are turning, and that things are actually being set up for success in terms of the dynamics within the department, the dynamics of the department communicating with other departments. Also just, you know, making sure that my department is using resources wisely, because, you know, it's all fun and dandy and awesome to say, you know, I want my department to be a family, and I want to, you know, everyone to be happy, and I want emotional intelligence. But, you know, the nitty gritty is, you know, there's a budget, and that budget needs to be spent properly and intelligently, and you know, the studio has to turn a profit if we want to take a next step into the next year. So balancing all of that is going to be much more much bigger source of anxiety for me than learning how to make a skin shader in Unreal.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you long, but my last two questions would be, so what if you were to give someone advice for sure? Okay, say you're recruiting, what do you tend to look for in terms of showreel quality or assessment for either Unreal or CFX or EFX?
That's a good question. The easy way to hire generally is to look at experience. It's unfortunate because that becomes like that whole catch-22 of you don't have any experience, so you can't get a job, but you can't, But if you want a relatively reliable metric to know that you're gonna hire somebody who's going to deliver, is you look at experience. Generally, I first look at I look at the the level of the studios that they've worked in, partly because there are just too many studios out there that will just do a couple of architectural renders and and you're just like, yeah, okay, you work there, but who are they? But so the bigger ones, that they've kind of worked in the same environment and they speak the same language and they understand the dynamics of the review process that we have in VFX. So that they're not going to be jarred when they come in and just go like, whoa, this is how the industry works, So partly for that reason, experience in VFX and in companies similar to ours. But second, I also look at the frequency at which they've changed companies. I generally get worried about people who have changed too frequently. If I see 3 months here, 2 months there, 3 months here, 2 months there, I see someone who either is a freelancer, and usually freelancers like freelancing, so they just continue freelancing. And what I'm looking for is full-time people are ready to kind of be dedicated to the department. Or somebody who just keeps getting fired or getting let go or not renewed, and then just goes and find their next gig. And because they've worked here, and there, they get the next gig. And there are a lot of people like that as well out there in the industry that just, have a LinkedIn like this big, but it's like 3 months at a time. And then you cross them once in the studio and you're like, oh, that's why.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so I get worried about that as well. So yeah, if you generally, you've been at you can stay at a studio for 2 to 3 years. That to me makes me more confident in hiring. Then, and obviously, that's the tip for the younger people who don't have enough experience to just be able to show 2 years here, 3 years there, blah blah blah. I'll look at a demo reel, but generally, like. What I look at problem solving in demo reels. Like I don't, again, like a good example for a Unreal Engine demo reel. If what you're sending on your reel is imported megascans with the default suns and atmosphere system loaded in, the sun set to dusk, so it looks all cool, and it's got and then you've got a slow pan of a camera going like this with a couple of trees that you've also got from Megascans. It's going to look really pretty. You're going to get 1 billion likes on LinkedIn and YouTube because it looks so awesome, but it shows no real skill per se, so for Unreal demo reels, I'm going to be looking for things that may not look as whiz bang, but actually demonstrate an actual understanding of how the engine works, especially in shading. I would be much more impressed by, a shortest path, finding method that crawls over a texture on a shader than I would a few megascans imported with a directional light. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, just to end it up, I'm just wondering if you can share any advice for anyone looking to get into the industry or pursue a similar journey to yours.
I wouldn't recommend the same as mine. I think my journey was as eclectic as it was, because I think because of where I came from, had no real industry, and I just had to make do with the jobs that were offered to me. So I would just, my first goal was I want to work at that company, and then whatever that company had for me, I would just take it. I didn't really choose my path in many ways. I just kind of survived it. I started making more rational decision and wanting to follow a path when I joined ILM after quitting DNEG, and decided I want to do creature simulation. That's where I always wanted to be, and I need to get in there because I'm not getting any younger, and I'm sick of people always making me do effects. I don't want to do effects. I just want to do creature stuff. So I got a job that was, my actual job title was creature TD. And I was like, yes, okay, now I've taken a job, not just to take a job, but to actually do what I want to do. The nice thing about the schools that people come from now, when they do, schools, is that those schools kind of help you find that direction a little bit first. And then they help you get that first job in that department. And then it allows you to focus on that and become very good at it. It doesn't really stop you from changing department down the track if you want to, but it does allow you to be able to choose your path a little bit early on in your career than what I had to deal with. So I would say, yeah, embrace that. Embrace the fact that you're able to kind of choose your path at university, and maybe spend a bit of time actually really kind of asking yourself what it is that you want to do, because the way that it's structured now, you will be able to do it in when you get out of school. So if you don't like rigging and you're at uni right now, and your group project decided that you were going to do the rigging because everybody else wanted to do something else, and you don't want to do rigging, don't do the rigging on that project. Keep fighting. Because that might put you in the wrong direction too quickly. But more importantly, when you do apply for your jobs, apply for the departments that you want to do. And also, maybe don't be too in a rush to go to the big studios with big names. I think that probably would be the most valuable thing I could say to a graduate right now. The schools will bang into your head that, so-and-so went to ILM, so-and-so went to Weta, so-and-so went to, so many people in those companies suck as well. Like, these companies are not, little paradises of gods of VFX. There are idiots everywhere. And the name of these companies also allow them to take advantage of you a lot more than smaller companies can. And there are also very big companies, so toxic bubbles appear in these big companies because the upper management can't have oversight of everything, and so you can have these little toxic departments or toxic kind of projects popping up everywhere. Smaller companies, everything's more out in the open. And more importantly, smaller companies, I think, especially in the beginning of your career, will teach you more about how everything works in the pipeline, rather than keeping you isolated in a department that doesn't really put you in touch with the other departments, because you're just kind of doing what you're doing a little bit like a robot and just outputting that down the line. And then the lighters picks it up and they do their magic on it, and you never really hear about it again. you get a lot more ownership of what you do when you're in a smaller studio and working on slightly smaller projects, and the team building skills that you get are quite important as well.
Yeah.
Big studios will shuffle you around like musical chairs.
Yeah.
You won't be sitting next to the same person for 2 months at a time, and the problem with that is you don't. And I think the big companies do that because they don't want bubbles to start appearing within the companies. So they mix people around to stop these little kind of cliques from bonding or appearing. But the downside of that is you're always kind of with strangers. You're always working with strangers, and that is not great for quality of life. I think it's stressful and a bit annoying. Some people might prefer it, but for me, it was a bit annoying to not be able to kind of have something that I feel like at home. Again, I spent more time at work than I did with the people I love, so I better feel comfortable with the people around me, And so smaller companies give you a lot more of that family feeling, and that you're in this together, and bigger understanding of people, of the dynamics between people, rather than just understanding how to do your job and passing down the pipe. So even though it might not sound as cool to kind of tell your friends from Bournemouth, hey, I got a job at this company, rather than saying I got a job at Weta, I think you might be passing up something of really kind of nice value by not doing a small company first.
Yeah, I do agree with that, definitely.
I didn't say it in a very succinct way. That took a long time to say something very simple.
No, it's great. Thank you so much, just because I appreciate the fact that you, with everything that you've said it with authenticity, and I can vouch for it, because it's just how the industry is. And I'm very grateful that you kept it very real to how it is. So thank you so much for sharing.
Lovely. Thank you so much too.